Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's Wendy Sellers, the HR lady, with my co-host, JC.
Wendy, it's a pleasure to be back. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I'm loving this podcast today and hearing so much from our expert guest here, Dr. Vin Murray. How you doing? Murray, sorry. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Wendy.
Oh, hey, HR is hard, and I'm in HR. I'm the HR lady. It is harder being in any role in business, not just HR, than ever in my lifetime, for sure. And I really do have a lot of empathy for managers, especially those managers who are thrown into management positions with absolutely no guidance whatsoever. They're like, "Oh, you've been here long enough. Go ahead, take over the role." By the way, can you sprinkle in empathy over there? And nobody teaches them what it is. But I do want to switch gears a little bit. And I want to talk about, equity and justice, and how they are critical components of a fair workplace. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, how could I be anything but in agreement, right? That when it doesn't feel just, when things don't feel equitable, people don't want to be there. Right? They want to be in environments where they feel safe, and justice and equity are critical pieces of personal safety.
What about, how can we use your book, your brain, for our listeners to help them determine, even, do they have biases in their workplace? And I'm sure they do. Everybody does, no matter how good you are. And how do we dismantle these systematic biases? Where do they start?
I mean, they start in all of the media we consume, in our culture, but it's the thing that's important here is not that we have bias. We all have bias, and we don't need to have shame about having bias. And if folks want, there's the Harvard University did a great series of implicit bias tests that you can take for free online. They're great. And so it's how do I know that I am swimming in waters that are racist, that are homophobic, that are sexist, misogynistic, right? How do I know that I'm swimming in those waters, and that those beliefs, even if I don't consciously believe them, they have snuck in, and they just are in there. And how do I not have shame about that? How does it just be okay to look at those things without fragility, with some resilience, of being of course that has gotten in me, because it's the water that I'm swimming in, it's the air that I'm breathing, it's everywhere, right? And that doesn't mean that we're complicit. It doesn't mean that we have to go along with it. It means that we can gently and with a lot of empathy and compassion examine those parts of ourselves that have embodied that messaging, right? And we can look at it, and we can feel how it is misaligned with our values, and we can take corrective action to come into alignment.
And I think, first of all, two things. I want to talk about values, and I want to talk about the implicit bias test. So I love that, the Harvard implicit bias test. Love them. I tell everybody about them. When I first found it, the HR lady, I did the age discrimination one. And me, Wendy Sellers, the HR lady, failed. It's not really a fail, but said that I was biased against older people, which I am. I am an older person. So it took me a while. I was like, what? What do you mean I'm biased against older people? Because I am an older person. And so I had to really think about why did I get this assessment? And it's because I was so busy protecting the younger generations that I was now turning around. I was like, oh, stop picking on Gen Y, stop picking on Gen Z, I'm Gen X, and that I was then going, oh, baby boomers are bad. Gen X, you're bad. So I learned that, and I had to just change my whole way I train and the whole way that I communicate about generations, so that I was fair and respectful to all of them and consistent with my actions towards all of them, and not covering up for other people. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
And then you mentioned about values. Oh, I love company values. In both of my books, I talk about company values and how to create company values. I believe you were talking about personal values, but bringing this back to the HR aspect is making sure that you do have company values in your organization and that you hire people that align with them. And that if you've already, if you're just creating the values now, you might have to train your people to say, hey, this is what you're going to be held accountable moving forward. And it's the number one thing, the number one reason why my phone rings all day, every day with my clients, I'm an HR consultant, is because somebody's acting a fool. And I almost always just immediately go, what are your company values? Remember, we talked about this. This is why you need to hold them accountable for their behavior. It's just as important as performance. And if they have, formal company values, you put it in their job description. You put it in the interview. You put it in the review, and you hold people accountable. All right, I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, I love that. And I agree with it. And what I would add is that our values need to be more than words. They need to be practices, and the practices need to be explicit. Like as a company. So for example, if our company value is equity, right? That we believe in equity in the workplace. That's our value. What are our actual physical practices of that, right? And those things need to be, they need to be practiced on the collective level, but also like how are individual employees practicing that value of equity, and how is that tracked, and how are they talking about it, and how are they being inviting into conversations about like, oh, are your practices of equity aligning with this value, right? And when it's out of alignment, how do we talk about that?
Yeah, it's super, super important. I agree with you as well that it is. It's important to make sure that you not just have a sign on the wall that says, oh, right, we respect people. No, you just saw somebody disrespect people and you didn't do anything about it. So therefore that's trash over there. And so you got to back it up. You got to put your money where your mouth is. And sometimes you're going to have to, end up removing somebody from the team just because they don't align with the values. And in the end, when you see all your other employees go, yeah, the bad person's gone, that's when you know you did the right thing, but that's also when you know you did it too late.
Right. It's hard. That's a hard call, right? And it's hard for a team to, when there's that misalignment of values and we see people not fulfilling the values. And even if it's not us and we see it in someone else in our team, it's like, it's really painful because you don't necessarily want to call that person out. Right. And like, who is going to enforce that value? Right. And that's where leadership comes in.
JC, you have some stats you want to share with us?
Organizations that actively promote equity and justice see a 41% improvement in employee trust and a 33% increase in job satisfaction. That's according to SHRM. And HR departments that actively lead efforts in promoting equity and dismantling systematic biases can see a 35% improvement in employee retention and a 48% increase in employee satisfaction. Back to you.
Those stats, I want to just go like, well, duh, right? Because of course, if you treat your people well, they're going to do better at work. Not necessarily. You still need to train them, hold them accountable, all of that, but so spot on. So, this is amazing. Thanks everybody for listening to part 3 of our 5-part series. In our next episode, we're going to talk to Dr. Vin here about the role of gender and sexuality in the workplace. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.